On the Choice of a Husband by Anonymous. Section 14 of Sketches of the Fair Sex in All Parts of the World. Recording by Bellona Times. Sketches of the Fair Sex in All Parts of the World by Anonymous. Chapter 14. Assist me, ye nine, while the youth I define, with whom I in wedlock would class. And ye blooming fair, lend a listening ear, to approve of the man as you pass. Not the changeable fry, who love nor know why, but follow bedept by their passions. Such votaries as these are like waves of the seas, and steered by their own inclinations. The hectoring blade, how unfit for the maid, where meekness and modesty reigns. Such a blundering bully I'll speak against truly, whatever I get for my pains. Not the dogmatic elf, whose great all is himself, whose alone ipse dixit is law. What a figure he'll make, how like Momus he'll speak, with snaring burlesque, a pshaw, pshaw. Not the covetous wretch, whose heart's at full stretch to gain an inordinate treasure. Him leave with the rest, and such mortals detest, who sacrifice life without measure. The fluttering fop, how empty his top, nay, but some call him coxcomb, I trow. But 'tis losing your time, he's not worth half a rhyme, let the fag ends of prose bind his brow. The guttering sot, what a conduit his throat, how beastly and vicious his life. Where drunkards prevail, whole families fail, much more an affectionate wife. One character yet, I with sorrow repeat, and oh, that the number were less. 'Tis the blasphemous crew, what a pattern they'll shew to their hapless and innocent race. Let wisdom then shine in the youth that is mine, whilst virtue his footsteps impress. Such I'd choose for my mate, whether sooner or late. Tell me, ladies, what think you of this? The chief point to be regarded, says Lady Pennington in her advice to the daughters, is in the choice of a companion for life, is a really virtuous principle, an unaffected goodness of heart. Without this, you will be continually shocked by indecency, and pained by impiety. So numerous have been the unhappy victims to the ridiculous opinion, a reformed libertine makes the best husband, that, did not experience daily evince the contrary, one would believe it impossible for a girl who has a tolerable degree of common understanding to be made the dupe of so erroneous a position, which has not the least shadow of reason for its foundation, and which a small share of observation will prove to be false in fact. A man who has been conversant with the worst sort of women is very apt to contract a bad opinion of, and a contempt for, the sex in general. Incapable of esteeming any, he is suspicious of all, jealous without cause, angry without provocation. His own disturbed imagination is a continued source of ill humor. To this is frequently joined a bad habit of body, the natural consequence of an irregular life, which gives an additional sourness to the temper. What rational prospect of happiness can there be with such a companion? And that this is the general character of those who are called reformed rakes, observation will certify. But admit there may be some exceptions. It is a hazard upon which no considerate woman would venture the peace of her whole life. The vanity of those girls who believe themselves capable of working miracles of this kind, and who give up their persons to men of libertine principles, upon the wild expectation of reclaiming them, justly deserves the disappointment which it will generally meet with. For, believe me, a wife is, of all persons, the least likely to succeed in such an attempt. Be it your care to find that virtue in a lover which you must never hope to form in a husband. Good sense and good nature are almost equally requisite. If the former is wanting, it will be next to an impossibility for you to esteem the person of whose behavior you may have cause to be ashamed. Mutual esteem is as essential to happiness in the married state as mutual affection. Without the latter, every day will bring with it some fresh cause of vexation, until repeated quarrels produce a coldness, which will settle into an irreconcilable aversion, and you will become, not only each other's torment, but the object of contempt to your family and to your acquaintance. This quality of good nature is, of all others, the most difficult to be ascertained, on account of the general mistake of blending it with good humor, as if they were in themselves the same; whereas, in fact, no two principles of action are more essentially different. But this may require some explanation. By good nature, I mean that true benevolence which partakes in the felicity of every individual within the reach of his ability, which relieves the distressed, comforts the afflicted, diffuses blessings, and communicates happiness far as its sphere of action can extend; and which, in the private scenes of life, will shine conspicuous in the dutiful son, in the affectionate husband, the indulgent father, the faithful friend, and in the compassionate master, both to man and beast. Good humor, on the other hand, is nothing more than a cheerful, pleasing deportment, arising either from a natural gaiety of mind, or from an affection of popularity, joined to an affability of behavior, the result of good breeding, and from a ready compliance with the taste of every company. This kind of mere good humor is, by far, the most striking quality. It is frequently mistaken for, and complimented with, the superior name of real good nature. A man, by this specious appearance, has often acquired that appellation who, in all the actions of private life, has been a morose, cruel, vengeful, sullen, haughty tyrant. Let them put on the cap whose temples fit the galling wreath. A man of truly benevolent disposition, and formed to promote the happiness of all around him, may sometimes, perhaps, from an ill habit of body, an accidental vexation, or from a commendable openness of heart, above the meanness of disguise, be guilty of little sallies of peevishness, or of ill humor, which, carrying the appearance of ill nature, may be unjustly thought to proceed from it, by persons who are unacquainted with his true character, and who take ill humor and ill nature to be synonymous terms, though in reality they bear not the least analogy to each other. In order to the forming a right judgment, it is absolutely necessary to observe this distinction, which will effectually secure you from the dangerous error of taking the shadow for the substance, an irretrievable mistake, pregnant with innumerable consequent evils. From what has been said, it plainly appears that the criterion of this amiable virtue is not to be taken for the general opinion, mere good humor being, to all intents and purposes, sufficient in this particular, to establish the public voice in favor of a man utterly devoid of every humane and benevolent affection of heart. It is only from the less conspicuous scenes of life, the more retired sphere of action, from the artless tenor of domestic conduct, that the real character can, with any certainty, be drawn. These undisguised proclaim the man; but as they shun the glare of light, nor court the noise of popular applause, they pass unnoticed, and are seldom known till after an intimate acquaintance. The best method, therefore, to avoid the deception in this case is to lay no stress on outward appearances, which are too often fallacious, but to take the rule of judging from the simple, unpolished sentiments of those whose dependent connections give them undeniable certainty, who not only see, but who hourly feel, the good or bad effect of that disposition to which they are subjected. By this I mean that if a man is equally respected, esteemed, and beloved by his dependents and domestics, you may justly conclude he has that true good nature, that real benevolence, which delights in communicating felicity, and enjoys the satisfaction it diffuses. But if by these he is despised and hated, served merely from a principle of fear, devoid of affection, which is ever easily discoverable, whatever may be his public character, however favorable to general opinion, be assured that his disposition is such as can never be productive of domestic happiness. I have been the more particular on this head, as it is one of the most essential qualifications to be regarded, and of all others the most liable to be mistaken. Never be prevailed with, my dear, to give your hand to a person defective in these material points. Secure a virtue of good nature and understanding in a husband, you may be secure of happiness. Without the two former it is unattainable. Without the latter, in a tolerable degree, it must be very imperfect. Remember, however, that infallibility is not the property of man, or you may entail disappointment on yourself, by expecting what is never to be found. The best men are sometimes inconsistent with themselves. They are liable to be hurried, by sudden starts of passion, into expressions and actions with which their cooler reason will condemn. They may have some oddities of behavior, and some peculiarities of temper. They may be subject to accidental ill humor, or to whimsical complaints. Blemishes of this kind often shade the brightest character, but they are never destructive of mutual felicity, unless when they are made so by an improper resentment, or by an ill judged opposition. When cooled, and in his usual temper, the man of understanding, if he has been wrong, will suggest to himself all that could be urged against him. The man of good nature will, unupbraided, own his error. Immediate contradiction is, therefore, wholly unserviceable, and highly imprudent. An after repetition is equally unnecessary and injudicious. Any peculiarities in the temper or behavior ought to be properly represented in the tenderest and in the most friendly manner. If the representation of them is made discreetly, it will generally be well taken. But if they are so habitual as not easily to be altered, strike not too often upon the unharmonious string. Rather let them pass unobserved. Such a cheerful compliance will better cement your union, and they may be made easy to yourself, by reflecting on the superior good qualities by which these trifling faults are so greatly overbalanced. You must remember, my dear, these rules are laid down on the supposition of your being united to a person who possesses the three qualifications for happiness before mentioned. In this case, no farther direction is necessary, but that you strictly perform the duty of a wife, namely, to love, to honor, and obey. The two first articles are a tribute so indispensably due to merit, that they must be paid by inclination, and they naturally lead to the performance of the last, which will not only be easy, but a pleasing task, since nothing can ever be enjoined by such a person that is in itself improper, and a few things will, that can, with any reason, be disagreeable to you. The being united to a man of irreligious principles makes it impossible to discharge a great part of the proper duty of a wife. To name but one instance, obedience will be rendered impracticable by frequent injunctions inconsistent with, and contrary to, the higher obligations of morality. This is not a supposition, but is a certainty founded upon facts, which I have too often seen and can attest. Where this happens, the reasons for non-compliance ought to be offered in a plain, strong, good natured manner. there is at least the chance of success from being heard; but should those reasons be rejected, or the hearing them refused, and silence on the subject enjoined, which is most probable, few people caring to hear what they know to be right, when they are determined not to be convinced by it, obey the injunction, and urge not the argument farther. Keep, however, steady to your principles, and suffer neither persuasion nor threats to prevail on you to act contrary to them. All commands repugnant to the laws of Christianity it is your indispensable duty to disobey. All requests that are inconsistent with prudence, or incompatible with the rank and character which you ought to maintain in life, it is your interest to refuse. A compliance with the former would be criminal, a consent to the latter highly indiscreet, and it might thereby subject you to general censure. For a man capable of requiring from his wife what he knows to be in itself wrong is equally capable of throwing the whole blame of such misconduct on her, and of afterwards upbraiding her for a behavior to which he will, upon the same principle, disown that he has been accessory. Many similar instances have come within the compass of my own observation. In things of less material nature, that are neither criminal in themselves nor pernicious in their consequences, always acquiesce, if insisted on, however disagreeable they may be to your own temper and inclination. Such a compliance will evidently prove that your refusal in the other cases proceeds not from a spirit of contradiction, but merely from a just regard to that superior duty which can never be infringed with impunity. As the want of understanding is by no art to be concealed, by no address to be disguised, it might be supposed impossible for a woman of sense to unite herself to a person whose defect in this instance must render that sort of rational society which constitutes the chief happiness of such an union impossible. Yet here, how often has the weakness of female judgment been conspicuous! The advantages of great superiority in rank or fortune have frequently proved so irresistible a temptation, as, in opinion, to outweigh not only the folly but even the vices of its possessor, a grand mistake, ever tacitly acknowledged by a subsequent repentance, when the expected pleasures of affluence, equipage, and all the glittering pageantry, have been experimentally found insufficient to make amends for the want of that constant satisfaction which results from the social joy of conversing with a reasonable friend. But however weak this motive must be acknowledged, it is more excusable than another, which, I fear, has sometimes had an equal influence on the mind. I mean so great a love of sway as to induce her to give the preference to a person of weak intellectuals, in hopes of holding uncontrolled the reins of government. The expectation is, in fact, ill grounded. Obstinacy and pride are generally the companions of folly. The silliest people are often the most tenacious of their opinions, and consequently the hardest of all others to be managed. But admit the contrary, the principle is in itself bad. It tends to invert the order of nature, and to counteract the design of Providence. A woman can never be seen in a more ridiculous light than when she appears to govern her husband. If, unfortunately, the superiority of understanding is on her side, the apparent consciousness of that superiority betrays a weakness that renders her contemptible in the sight of every considerate person, and it may, very probably, fix in his mind a dislike never to be eradicated. In such a case, if it should ever be your own, remember that some degree of dissimulation is commendable, so far as to let your husband's defects appear unobserved. When he judges wrong, never flatly contradict, but lead him insensibly into another opinion, in so discreet a manner that it may seem entirely his own, and let the whole credit of every prudent determination rest on him, without indulging the foolish vanity of claiming any merit to yourself. Thus a person of but an indifferent capacity may be so assisted as, in many instances, to shine with borrowed lustre, scarce distinguishable from the native, and by degrees he may be brought into a kind of mechanical method of acting properly in all the common occurrences of life. Odd as this position may seem, it is founded in fact. I have seen the method successfully practiced by more than one person, where a weak mind, on the governed side, has been so prudently set off as to appear the sole director, like the statue of the Delphic god, which was thought to give forth its own oracles, whilst the humble priest, who lent his voice, was by the shrine concealed, nor sought a higher glory than a supposed obedience to the power he would be thought to serve. End of Section 14.
Section 15 of Sketches of the Fair Sex in All Parts of the World. Sketches of the Fair Sex in All Parts of the World, by Anonymous. A Letter to a New Married Man. I received the news of your marriage with infinite delight, and hope the sincerity with which I wish you happiness may excuse the liberty I take in giving you a few rules, whereby more certainly to obtain it. I see you smile at my wrong-headed kindness, and, reflecting on the charms of your bride, cry out in a rapture, that you are happy enough without any rules. I know you are. But after one of the 40 years, which I hope you will pass pleasingly together, is over, this letter may come in turn, and rules for felicity may not be found unnecessary, however some of them may appear impracticable. Could that kind of love be kept alive through the marriage state, which makes the charm of a single one, the sovereign good would no longer be sought for. In the union of two faithful lovers it would be found. But reason shows that this is impossible, and experience informs us that it never was so. We must preserve it as long, and supply it as happily as we can. When your present violence of passion subsides, however, and a more cool and tranquil affection takes its place, be not hasty to censure yourself as indifferent, or to lament yourself as unhappy. You have lost that only which it was impossible to retain, and it were graceless amid the pleasures of a prosperous summer to regret the blossoms of a transient spring. Neither unwarily condemn your bride's insipidity till you have recollected that no object however sublime, no sounds however charming, can continue to transport us with delight when they no longer strike us with novelty. The skill to renovate the powers of pleasing is said indeed to be possessed by some women in an eminent degree, but the artifices of maturity are seldom seen to adorn the innocence of youth. You have made your choice, and ought to approve it. Satiety follows quickly upon the heels of possession, and to be happy, we must always have something in view. The person of your lady is already all your own, and will not grow more pleasing in your eyes, I doubt, though the rest of your sex will think her handsome for these dozen of years. Turn, therefore, all your attention to her mind, which will daily grow brighter by polishing. Study some easy science together, and acquire a similarity of tastes while you enjoy a community of pleasures. You will by this means have many images in common, and be freed from the necessity of separating to find amusement. Nothing is so dangerous to wedded love as the possibility of either being happy out of the company of the other. Endeavor, therefore, to cement the present intimacy on every side. Let your wife never be kept ignorant of your income, your expenses, your friendships or aversions. Let her know your very faults, but make them amiable by your virtues. Consider all concealment as a breach of fidelity. Let her never have anything to find out in your character. And remember that from the moment one of the partners turns spy upon the other, they have commenced a state of hostility. Seek not for happiness in singularity. and dread a refinement of wisdom as a deviation into folly. Listen not to those sages who advise you always to scorn the counsel of a woman, and if you comply with her requests, pronounce you to be wife-ridden. I said that the person of your lady would not grow more pleasing to you, but pray let her never suspect that it grows less so. That a woman will pardon an affront to her understanding much sooner than one to her person is well known, nor will any of us contradict the assertion. All our attainments, all our arts, are employed to gain and keep the heart of man. And what mortification can exceed the disappointment if the end be not obtained? There is no reproof however pointed, no punishment however severe, that a woman of spirit will not prefer to neglect. And if she can endure it without complaint, it only proves that she means to make herself amends by the attention of others for the slights of her husband. For this, and for every reason, it behooves a married man not to let his politeness fail, though his ardor may abate, but to retain at least that general civility towards his own lady which he is so willing to pay to every other, and not show a wife of 18 or 20 years old, that every man in company can treat her with more complaisance than he, who so often vowed to her eternal fondness. It is not my opinion that a young woman should be indulged in every wild wish of her gay heart or giddy head, but contradiction may be softened by domestic kindness, and quiet pleasures substituted in the place of noisy ones. Public amusements are not indeed so expensive as is sometimes imagined, but they tend to alienate the minds of married people from each other. A well-chosen society of friends and acquaintance, more eminent for virtue and good sense than for gaiety and splendor, where the conversation of the day may afford a comment for the evening, seems the most rational pleasure this great town can afford. That your own superiority should always be seen, but never felt, seems an excellent general rule. A wife should outshine her husband in nothing, not even in her dress. The bane of married happiness among the city men in general has been, that finding themselves unfit for polite life, they transferred their vanity to their ladies, dressed them up gaily, and sent them out a gallanting, while the good man was to regale with port wine or rum punch, perhaps among mean companions, after the compting house was shut. This practice produced the ridicule thrown on them in all our comedies and novels since commerce began to prosper. But now that I am so near the subject, a word or two on jealousy may not be amiss. For though not a failing of the present age's growth, yet the seeds of it are too certainly sown in every warm bosom for us to neglect it as a fault of no consequence. If you are ever tempted to be jealous, watch your wife narrowly, but never tease her. Tell her your jealousy, but conceal your suspicion. Let her, in short, be satisfied that it is only your odd temper, and even troublesome attachment, that makes you follow her. But let her not dream that you ever doubted seriously of her virtue, even for a moment. If she is disposed towards jealousy of you, let me beseech you to be always explicit with her, and never mysterious. Be above delighting in her pain, of all things; nor do your business nor pay your visits with an air of concealment, when all you are doing might as well be proclaimed perhaps in the parish vestry. But I hope better than this of your tenderness and your virtue, and will release you from a lecture you have so little need of, unless your extreme youth and my uncommon regard will excuse it. And now farewell. Make my kindest compliments to your wife, and be happy in proportion as happiness is wished you by, dear sir, &c. Garrick's Advice to Married Ladies. Ye fair married dames who so often deplore That a lover once blessed is a lover no more, attend to my counsel, nor blush to be taught That prudence must cherish what beauty has caught. The bloom on your cheek, and the glance of your eye, Your roses and lilies may make the men sigh; But roses and lilies and sighs pass away, And passion will die as your beauties decay. Use the man that you wed like your favorite guitar, Though music in both, they are both apt to jar. How tuneful and soft from a delicate touch, Not handled too roughly, nor played on too much. The sparrow and linnet will feed from your hand, grow tame by your kindness, and come at command. Exert with your husband the same happy skill, for hearts, like your birds, may be tamed to your will. Be gay and good humored, complying and kind, turn the chief of your care from your face to your mind. 'Tis thus that a wife may her conquests improve, and Hymen shall rivet the fetters of love. Section 15. Recording by Trisha G.